a special child I have. He's been given an amazing gift, and he's also been given huge challenges to go along with it. Like Leslie Stahl said in the 60 Minutes clip, he's a fascinating and mysterious mixture of ability and disability. But what's important to note in that is that with Rex, he hasn't allowed himself to be defined by the disability. Instead, he makes people stand up and take note of that tremendous talent you'll see in a few minutes, that great gift. And I'm pretty sure you'll see in a few minutes that he does it with a great big smile on his face. In fact, for me, that's really what defines my son. It's that special joy he has that's really unique. In spite of the extremes he lives with, he's managed, miraculously, to live just as a child. And recently, I was very moved by an article in Your Business, the words of Ray Faltinsky, saying that the only known side effect of Himalayan goji juice is the tendency to smile more often, and that it's your hope to bring smiles to the faces of children in need throughout the world. Wow. Yeah, what important words those are. And it tells me, it affirms to me what an honor it is for me to be here with you all in such a special company with such an important mission. And also, those words said to me that my son is almost like a little poster child for Goji kids because of that 1,000 megawatt smile. Yeah, he's got some kind of laugh. And there's something really special about a child's laugh, isn't there? The magic of it. But with Rex, the laughter, the smile, it was never a given. And what I'm going to share with you for a few minutes before he comes out is what it's taken us to get to that point where we can have laughter and joy in our lives, the road we've been on. Because before Rex was born, I was out there in the business world, working in finance, and life was just moving along, and I found it challenging and fast-paced. But what I found before Rex was that when there were obstacles, I could somehow manage to get past them, because before Rex, I'd really never had to give any thought to what do you do when things go really wrong, because things were going pretty smoothly, I suppose. Professionally and personally, I met and married a handsome South African gentleman, and we were thrilled when we were expecting a child. And we had a lot of dreams for our baby. Like we all do. We do that, don't we, as parents? We project our own dreams onto our kids, our future kids. Well, for me, Rex's birth and the first 2 years of his life cut all that drastically short. Like Leslie Stahl said, he was born with an array of problems so extreme it looked as though he'd never walk, talk, or do much of anything. But in the beginning, all we knew, he was blind. Thought that was as bad as it could get, but it was just the beginning. Over time, trying to get him help at the Blind Children's Center to learn to use his hands, we soon discovered that he would not just use his hands, but he would ball them up into fists. His hands were hypersensitive, and if you made him uncoil his fingers to touch something, he'd scream, as though you'd made him touch burning coals. And then sounds of the world also began to overwhelm his ears, and he began to put his fists or his fingers into his ears. It was like his brain was becoming a mass of chaos. And I'd like you all to visualize something for a minute. Imagine a child just short of his second birthday, who lives his life in darkness because he can't see. Okay? Then he balls his hands into fists so he won't have to touch anything that's painful for him. And then he rams those fists into his ears so he won't have to hear sounds that overwhelm his sensitive body. I don't know if you can even imagine such a child, the vision of it. But just imagine for a moment that it's your child. Because nothing I'd learned in life through education or experience had prepared me for any of this. The severe dysfunction of my child's brain. And I think that when you're in a period of crisis, you need to stop looking too far ahead and focus in on what's in front of you. And I found that I needed to really look to see at Rex in the moment what he needed. And he and I both needed, at that time, to get away from noise that was too much for us. For him, it was the sounds of the world. Even everyday sounds like light switches, running water. So I began filtering his environment to give therapies time to work. But I found that I needed to get away from some noise too. And that noise for me was my own preconceived notions of what life was supposed to be. And to me, the noise was reports from educational specialists that said every day, he can't do that, he won't do this, he cannot do. It seemed to be a catch-all. Well, I shut my ears to that, and in doing that, I didn't miss what else was right in front of me. And that it was amazing to watch him listen to music, the one thing that wasn't noise. And when he listened to classical music, Mozart or Beethoven, there was this look on his face that seemed to say, this I understand. And because of that, his dad and I got him a little piano keyboard for his 2nd birthday. And I remember he laid his hands on that piano for the first time, and as usual, his hands went back up, touching something offensive. But then, in spite of himself, he was so curious about the sounds of the piano notes that he uncurled his own fingers and overcame his own sensitivities so that he could lay his hands on that piano again, and then began exploring it. And within a minute had actually played a little rhythmic series of notes and then replicated it. The piano, it became his lifeline. He couldn't get enough of it. He began playing it day after day like you saw in the video, just dropping from pure exhaustion. And music came to represent hope for us and for him, that first he'd found a passion, and second, that more would come from it, from the music. But then I was hit by a 1-2 punch I never saw coming. And the first part of that was that my marriage was falling apart. Didn't realize it. Too busy in crisis mode, and his dad left. Couldn't do it. And not long after that, I was called into a meeting of educational specialists. He was 3 at the time, to discuss the future, what it held. And I thought things were looking up because of the music, the piano. He had begun to develop the laugh, begun to show joy in his music and creativity. But as I walked into that meeting, the specialists saw things a little different. And for them, he wasn't walking yet, 3 years old. That meant that he might end up in a wheelchair, because patterns in the brain can be set for a lifetime by 3. And he couldn't pronounce a single word. So they hit him with the label nonverbal. And they told me they needed to begin teaching him sign language. Well, I left the meeting stunned, like I'd been assaulted. It was as though a jury had handed me an educational verdict, and it read like, your son will never walk, talk, or do much of anything. And those are the words that you saw in 60 Minutes. That's where it came from, that meeting. It was like they were telling me he wouldn't have a life.